Hello! In the late 1970s and mid-1980s, drug trafficking organizations grew rapidly and powerfully. Among them, a large, brutal, efficient, and meticulously organized criminal group emerged as a supreme force, the Guadalajara Cartel. This cartel was founded in 1978 by Rafael Caro Quintero, Ernesto Fonseca Carrillo, and a mastermind behind the criminal empire that committed crimes whose repercussions are still felt throughout Mexico decades after its collapse. The head of this empire is known by various names such as the Godfather, the Drug Tsar, and the most famous title, the Kingpin of Kingpins, Joaquin Guzman, one of Mexico's most notorious drug lords. However, within the cartel, Miguel Angel Felix Gallardo, a powerful and influential figure, initially served as a mere bodyguard. Felix Gallardo was born on January 8, 1946, and grew up on a farm in Bella Vista, a suburb of Culiacan, Sinaloa. After graduating high school, Gallardo studied business at university before taking a job as a federal justice agent in Mexico, a role similar to the FBI in the USA, tasked with enforcing federal laws and combating drug trafficking. However, this agency was rife with corruption, and Gallardo used it to protect and shield his drug trafficking activities. Eventually, the agency was disbanded in 2002 due to high levels of corruption. During his time as a federal agent in the mid to late 1960s, Gallardo was assigned as a bodyguard for the governor of Sinaloa, Leopoldo Sanchez Celis. The relationship between Gallardo and the governor developed to the point where Gallardo was chosen to be the godfather to Sanchez's son. This relationship helped Gallardo build important political connections to protect and advance his drug trafficking organization. Gallardo was introduced to the drug trade through connections with Pedro Avilas Perez, also known as Don Pedro. If you know the history of Mexican drug cartels, you will know that it all began with Don Pedro. He was also known as El León de la Sierra, or the Lion of the Sierra, referring to the Sierra Madre mountain range in Mexico where he lived and operated. Don Pedro became the first major drug lord in Mexico by the late 1960s. Second-generation traffickers like Felix Gallardo, Rafael Caro Quintero, and Ernesto Fonseca Carrillo all learned the trade from Don Pedro. Drug trafficking has changed significantly over the past 60 years. Initially, unnecessary violence and official cartels were rare. Back when Gallardo was starting out, there were only two major drug cartels in Mexico, the Gulf Cartel and the Avilas Cartel, led by Don Pedro. Compared to today, when law enforcement identifies the existence of dozens of drug cartels and 36 smaller or supplementary groups involved in drug trafficking, the Gulf Cartel, led by Juan Nepomuceno, was still at the forefront and continued to exist. Since the 1930s, smuggling organizations in the USA during Prohibition operated from Matamoros, Tamaulipas, just across the border from Brownsville, Texas. They engaged in various types of organized crime such as gambling, prostitution, auto theft, and also sold a small amount of heroin. However, by the 1970s, drug trafficking was no longer their main focus. In contrast, the Avilas organization was centered along the Sierra Mountains in the Golden Triangle area of Chihuahua, Sinaloa, and Durango. From this remote location, Don Pedro was able to establish a drug trafficking organization and distribute large quantities of contraband. This group primarily trafficked in marijuana and heroin, but was also one of the first to start smuggling cocaine from South America into the USA, with their main goal being to get drugs into the USA. At that time, at least initially, no violence occurred, and which is quite rare for drug cartels. Don Pedro forbade violence as he saw it as an unnecessary distraction that would draw unwanted attention to the cartel and threaten the business. So, how does one engage in drug trafficking without using violence? The Avilas cartel protected its empire with dollars instead of bullets, and through his connections, Felix Gallardo brokered a deal with law enforcement. This agreement had two rules. Don Pedro would be granted specific operational areas where he was allowed to trade drugs as long as he maintained peace in those areas and was willing to share a portion of his drug profits to benefit the local economy. Things went smoothly in the early to mid-1970s, allowing the cartel to grow rapidly. However, other traffickers or drug trafficking groups began to emerge throughout Mexico, and things really started to deteriorate in 1978. Information from USA and Mexican authorities later revealed that a power struggle had erupted between Don Pedro and Felix Gallardo, leading each of them to conspire to gain full control of the cartel. Just before Don Pedro's death, there was a meeting of drug trafficking leaders in Mexico. Gallardo wanted to form a large cartel that included all the leaders of the drug trafficking groups, but Don Pedro did not see the need and was particularly offended when one of his rivals, Gallardo, brought all the parties together. Anyway, we know that right after this meeting, Don Pedro was killed, and to this day there are many mysteries surrounding his death. The official version states that he was killed in a shootout with law enforcement on September 15, 1978, about 6 miles from Culiacan at a police checkpoint near a highway junction. However, there are at least 4 different versions of what actually happened. The most interesting version is the one from Netflix's Narcos Mexico, in which Don Pedro is shot dead by the police, and then Gallardo is handed a handgun to deliver the final shot to his head. After Don Pedro's death, Miguel Angel Felix Gallardo, Ernesto Fonseca Carrillo, Don Neto, and Rafael Caro Quintero, Rafa, took over the leadership of the cartel. According to the earlier meeting, they coordinated the production and trafficking operations of various groups, which formed the core of what would later be known as the Guadalajara Cartel. Miguel Angel Felix Gallardo took drug trafficking to a new level. With his experience working in the Mexican Federal Judicial Police and his connections with the Sinaloa governor, Gallardo could leverage many of his political connections to protect the new organization. They then began producing high-quality seedless marijuana, known as sinsemilla, in large quantities on vast fields, something that had never been done on such a scale before in history. By the early 1980s, Colombian drug cartels were flooding the USA with large quantities of cocaine and the USA. Drug Enforcement Administration, DEA, focused its efforts primarily on Florida, the main destination for Colombian cartels, importing tons of cocaine via the Bahamas and then into Florida through Miami. To avoid law enforcement scrutiny in Florida, Colombian cartels began using Mexico as a transit point. This began through Honduran smuggler Juan Ramon Mata Ballesteros, the main link between the Guadalajara cartel and Colombian cartels. He introduced the Avilas cartel to Santiago Ocampo of the Cali cartel, one of Colombia's largest cartels. This time, instead of receiving a 25 to 30% commission in cash for transportation services as Don Pedro had done, the Guadalajara cartel would take 50% of the cocaine. They handled the transportation and distribution themselves, marking a breakthrough for the Guadalajara cartel. Thanks to handling and distributing cocaine themselves, the Guadalajara cartel's profits soared to about $5 billion annually. By the mid-1980s, they also collaborated with Pablo Escobar and the Medellin cartel to assist in smuggling cocaine across the USA border. Again, this was arranged through Mata, making the Guadalajara cartel the dominant force in North American drug trafficking during the 1980s, witnessing the rise of notorious drug lords like El Chapo and El Mayo. By the mid-1980s, the Guadalajara cartel completely dominated the drug trade in Mexico, with Gallardo considered the kingpin of the criminal world. By this time, he owned over 50 homes and 200 farms, with an estimated total value of $500 million. Gallardo protected the Guadalajara cartel's drug trafficking operations primarily with money and bribery rather than ammunition. Much of their operation was safeguarded by local law enforcement, politicians, and Mexico's secret police, equivalent to the CIA in the USA at the time. The USA CIA was also alleged to use the drug trade in Mexico to secretly fund President Ronald Reagan's anti-communist efforts in Nicaragua. This was a major issue, as after the Iran-Contra scandal was uncovered, it became the only way for the Contra faction to receive financial support. The Iran-Contra scandal, which occurred in 1986 during Reagan's presidency, involved senior USA officials secretly selling arms to Iran in violation of an arms export ban. The plan was created under a different pretext to secure the release of USA hostages in Iran. When public outrage erupted over the White House exchanging arms for hostages, the money earned from the arms deals was subsequently used to fund the rebel groups in Nicaragua. However, not everyone in law enforcement agreed with this. The USA government and the Mexican military were still trying to apprehend drug traffickers. In 1984, based on information from DEA agent Kiki Camarena, 450 Mexican soldiers, supported by helicopters, conducted Operation Godfather and destroyed a 500-acre marijuana plantation called Rancho Buffalo in Chihuahua with an estimated annual yield of $2.5 billion. This was an unacceptable blow to the Guadalajara cartel and the USA CIA-backed scheme to fund Contra operations in Nicaragua. This was also the second field that Kiki had destroyed, making him a significant problem. The DEA reported that by January 1985, Kiki was very close to uncovering a billion-dollar drug network involving the CIA, Mexican government officials, politicians, local police, and the Guadalajara cartel. Because he was about to expose the entire operation of the Guadalajara cartel, he was abducted in broad daylight on February 7, 1985. Camarena was then taken to a Guadalajara cartel safe house at 881 Lope de Vega Street in western Guadalajara. There, Kiki was beaten, tortured, and interrogated for approximately 30 hours. To keep him awake during the ordeal, the cartel continuously injected him with stimulants. Eventually, Camarena's body was found almost a month later, wrapped in plastic and discarded next to a farm in Michoacán. The torture and murder of Camarena sparked outrage from the USA DEA, which launched Operation Legend, the largest murder investigation ever conducted by the DEA. The DEA sent a special unit from the USA to coordinate the investigation in Mexico. The investigation quickly pointed to the three leaders of the Guadalajara cartel as those responsible. Within less than 2 months, Caro Quintero and Fonseca Carrillo were arrested. However, Felix Gallardo, with his connections, was not investigated and was protected. He was shielded by politicians in Sinaloa and later in Guadalajara, where he could avoid arrest. From this point on, the kingpin of the kingpins disappeared from the public eye and moved to Mazatlan for a few years before returning to Guadalajara in 1987. One of his first actions upon arriving in the city was to contact Guillermo González Calderón, the head of the Federal Judicial Police of Mexico and also his associate. Calderón ensured that despite Gallardo's name appearing in the Camarena case, authorities did not have enough evidence against him. Even if Carlos Salinas was elected and assumed the presidency, everything would be resolved. Although Salinas won the presidency in one of the most controversial and suspicious elections in Mexican history, but nothing could save Gallardo. On April 8, 1989, Gallardo was finally arrested after agreeing to meet Calderón at a restaurant in Guadalajara and was taken away in front of his wife and 2 children. This arrest was largely intended to redirect public attention from the controversial presidential election to the capture of Mexico's most wanted man. A USA law exists that allows for the denial of aid and even the imposition of trade and financial sanctions against countries involved in the production and trafficking of illegal drugs. The exact price to avoid these sanctions was none other than the arrest of Felix Gallardo, the kingpin of the kingpins. Gallardo was arrested at the age of 43, charged in both Mexico and the USA, with kidnapping and murdering Kiki Camarena, as well as extortion, drug trafficking, and several other crimes. The hunt and arrest of Gallardo truly became a catalyst for exposing widespread corruption in Mexico's political and law enforcement sectors. Within days of Gallardo's arrest, several police chiefs were also arrested, with around 90 other officers deserting and disappearing. Although imprisoned, Gallardo still maintained control over the Guadalajara cartel. However, with the 3 cartel leaders arrested, Gallardo considered that diversification would be more effective and less likely to be dismantled by law enforcement. Thus, in a meeting arranged by his lawyer, several top drug lords in Mexico met in 1989 at a house in Acapulco, where they divided the territory of the Guadalajara cartel into different factions. The Tijuana route would go to Gallardo's nephews, the Arellano Felix brothers. The Juarez route would remain with the Carrillo Fuentes family. Miguel Caro Quintero would manage the Sonora corridor. Joaquin Guzman, El Chapo, and Hector Luis Palma would handle operations on the Pacific coast, joined by Ismael Zambada Garcia El Mayo. Philip Gallardo was sentenced to 45 years in prison, and after serving 28 years, he continues to serve his sentence. In 2017, Gallardo was retried and sentenced to an additional 37 years for the death of Kiki Camarena. Notably, both then and now, Gallardo has always maintained that he was not involved in Kiki's murder and had actually warned Rafa that killing a DEA agent would be unnecessary and would only anger the USA government, focusing attention on the Guadalajara cartel. And of course, he was right while in prison. Despite this, Gallardo continued to try to coordinate the fragmented cartels via mobile phones until he was transferred to a maximum security prison in 1993. At this facility, there were no phones, and that ended any hopes he had of continuing to oversee the cartels. He was sent to the Federal Social Readaptation Center, NOAN in Altiplano, Juarez, which opened in 1991 and was considered Mexico's supermax prison. This center has housed dozens of drug cartel leaders and was advertised as impenetrable and escape-proof. That was until June 11, 2015, when El Chapo escaped through a nearly 1-mile-long tunnel dug beneath the prison, eventually emerging 33 feet through the bathroom floor of El Chapo's cell. Gallardo was not so fortunate. His transfer to the maximum security facility effectively dashed his hopes of restoring unity among the rival cartels. In the 30 years following the collapse of the Guadalajara cartel, the remaining 4 cartels fought and splintered into 9 cartels that now dominate drug trafficking in Mexico. Today, these cartels rely on violence to claim territories and smuggling routes rather than bribing officials like their predecessors. These ongoing disputes and escalating conflicts have created political, social, and military chaos known as the Mexican Drug War. As for Gallardo, he has been continuously imprisoned since 1989. It is said that during his time there, he could only go outside for about 45 minutes each day and spent the rest of the time locked in a cell with minimal and poor quality food, no medical care, and no family visits. By 2008, the former drug lord's children created a website, MiguelFelixGallardo.com, in an effort to call on the sitting president to intervene and ensure their father received better medical care. As he aged, Felix Gallardo experienced several health issues, including deafness, loss of an eye, and cardiovascular problems. In March 2013, Gallardo launched a legal battle to request house arrest at the age of 70. However, a Mexican federal court denied his request. In 2014, they approved his transfer to a medium security prison in Guadalajara due to his deteriorating health, where he remains to this day. During times of war, when tensions rise, people often do anything for money to survive. In such circumstances, a region has emerged as the world's largest drug-producing factory, surpassing even the Golden Triangle and dominating the global market. What's more striking is that those who cultivate poppy plants no longer have to hide like sewer rats. Instead, they operate openly and are heavily protected. This region is known as the Golden Crescent, which now controls up to 90% of the world's drug supply. While the Golden Triangle became the world's drug factory due to the independence movement of the Shan people and Kun Sa, the Golden Crescent was born from the struggle of the Afghan people against the invaders of their land. Going back to the late 1970s and 1980s when the Soviet Union began deploying troops to Afghanistan, the Storm 333 operation took place on December 27, 1979. With 600 Soviet special forces, they overthrew the local government in just one night. The Soviet special forces attacked the palace, killing Afghan President Hafizullah Amin along with 200 of his bodyguards. They then occupied government buildings, military bases, and major media centers in Kabul. In one evening, Amin's entire government was wiped out and over 1,000 Afghan soldiers were killed. However, the Soviets could only overthrow the Afghan government, but they couldn't destroy their religion and ideals. Afghanistan is a nation with a strong Islamic tradition, and they would never accept the atheist communist regime. Resistance was inevitable, leading to the formation of a force known as the Mujahideen. To fund their operations and purchase weapons for the resistance against the Soviet Union, the entire southern Afghanistan and the border region, with Iran and Pakistan, turned into massive drug factories. With rugged terrain difficult to control, the Soviet Su-24 airstrikes and searches could not completely destroy these production facilities. The complex terrain of the Golden Crescent, with overlapping mountain ranges forming valleys, covers most of Afghanistan and parts of Iran and Pakistan. Moreover, the Mujahideen established a network of tunnels within these mountains, turning them into ideal warehouses that were nearly indestructible. At this time, the Mujahideen received strong support from the USA and its allies to fight against the Soviet Union. They overlooked drug enforcement efforts as a way to covertly support the fighters. Not only the USA, but Iran and Pakistan also played significant roles in secretly transporting drugs, distributing the Mujahideen's products worldwide. With such favorable conditions in terms of geography and alliances, the number of poppy plants grown here rapidly increased, gradually equaling that of the Golden Triangle. By 1991, as pressure from Kun Sa intensified on the Thai, Laotian, Myanmar militaries and criminal gangs, the Golden Crescent became even more critical in the global drug market. The annual drug production of the Golden Crescent region surpassed that of the Golden Triangle, rising from around 100 tons in the early 1980s to 1,800 tons per year. Although lacking in the refinement of illicit drugs, according to a report by Mint Press News, the CIA intervened in the war in Afghanistan during the 1980s. In the 1970s, opium cultivation in Afghanistan was minimal, but the situation changed in 1979 when the CIA launched Operation Cyclone, intending to fund the Mujahideen rebels to eliminate Soviet presence. A decade later, the CIA closely coordinated with its Pakistani partners to supply $2 billion in weapons and collaborate with organizations such as Osama bin Laden and other warlords. With the CIA's covert war opium production along the Afghanistan-Pakistan border skyrocketed, leading to the establishment of numerous drug manufacturing factories. Trucks loaded with weapons moved from Afghanistan to neighboring countries to the west, and on their return, they were filled with opium, which was transported to newly established refining labs and eventually distributed to the farthest corners of the world. After the Soviet withdrawal in 1989 and the collapse of the Soviet-backed government in 1992, opium cultivation flourished even more as local warlords rose to power. Each of them claimed dominion and continuously expanded poppy cultivation, causing the annual drug production to soar from 1,800 tons per year to 4,600 tons per year. In 1996, the Taliban emerged as the ruling force in Afghanistan and took control of poppy cultivation, integrating it into the official GDP of the country and creating jobs for the people. When the USA invaded Afghanistan in 2001, drugs became an even more formidable source of power for the Taliban as the number of USA enemies grew rapidly, along with the number of bombs they dropped, resulting in countless organizations and nations willing to cooperate with the Taliban. The border regions of Afghanistan with Pakistan and Iran became havens for drug trafficking to the rest of the world. Like the Soviet Union before it, the USA could not find a way to eliminate the refining facilities and poppy cultivation. Bombing and military operations were as futile as pouring salt into the sea, unable to address the core issue, the income and livelihood of the Afghan people. In 1996, under Taliban rule, Afghanistan was ranked as the 6th poorest country in the world. However, USA intervention has turned it into the poorest nation globally. In 1996, Afghanistan's per capita income was only $500 per year. After 20 years of USA intervention, this figure remains unchanged at $500 per year. But when adjusted for inflation, the real income of the Afghan people is less than 1/10 of what it was during the Taliban era. Taking up arms with the Taliban and cultivating poppies became the only viable option for people to earn money to support their families and drive the USA military out of the country. After each poppy harvest season, a new army was assembled with thousands of impoverished young men ready to take up arms and join the Taliban. It is estimated that each Taliban fighter is paid around $300 to $500 per month, equivalent to the annual salary of a regular civilian. Perhaps this is what makes the Golden Crescent so alluring and a source of endless strength for Afghanistan. Many might not know that in the global fight against drugs, the Taliban was the most successful. In 2000, the Taliban imposed a nationwide ban on poppy cultivation in Afghanistan. This caused the global drug supply to nearly vanish instantly. While the Taliban's ban lasted less than a year, the drug production plummeted from 4,600 tons per year to a remarkable low of 185 tons per year, a 99% reduction by 2000. The Taliban hoped that Washington would respond positively to their campaign to eradicate opium poppies, expecting the USA to reconsider and lift sanctions to help develop Afghanistan's economy. The world praised the Taliban's actions, seeing them as heroes in the fight against drugs and believing that humanity was nearing victory in the war on drugs. However, subsequent actions by the USA rendered all previous efforts futile. In 2001, following Osama bin Laden's attack on the Twin Towers, WTC, the USA ignored the Taliban's efforts. Less than a week later, USA troops landed in Afghanistan and began patrolling the opium fields. It is estimated that the presence of USA troops led to an unprecedented expansion of drug production in Afghanistan, turning the country into the world's largest producer of illicit drugs. According to many experts, by 2008, drugs contributed to half of Afghanistan's GDP. To compare, during the darkest days when Pablo Escobar dominated the cocaine trade, it only accounted for about 3% of Colombia's GDP. The United Nations estimated that about 6,300 tons of opium were produced annually in Afghanistan's fields. To cultivate enough poppies to produce such a large amount of drugs, an area equivalent to the size of Rhode Island in the USA would be needed. While cracking down on drug-related crime in Colombia, the USA refused to employ similar methods in Afghanistan. NATO spokesman James Apatherai explained, "We cannot eliminate the only source of income in the world's second poorest country without providing them with alternative livelihoods." However, not everyone agreed with NATO's reasoning. Matthew Ho, a former USA Marine Corps captain, expressed his skepticism, stating that Americans feared that if they launched an anti-drug air campaign, American pilots would destroy all the opium fields, including those that were American-owned. In 2009, Ho resigned from his position at the State Department in Zabul Province, Afghanistan, in protest against the USA government's military presence in the country. Speaking to the media, Ho complained that under the guise of counterinsurgency, NATO forces had neglected the monitoring of opium fields and drug production. In reality, what NATO forces were doing was merely protecting the wealth of those in power in Afghanistan. It was the Americans who became major drug traffickers, including Ahmed Wali Karzai, the brother of Afghan President Hamid Karzai, who was allegedly on the CIA payroll. Even worse, thanks to NATO units' favoritism, some local warlords and drug lords destroyed their rivals' crops to profit from USA money, becoming even richer and more powerful. Professor Alfred McCoy argued that the Taliban was one of the groups that benefited the most from the drug trade, using the proceeds to increase their power and fight against the USA. McCoy explained that the explosion in drug production and USA failure to control it provided the Taliban with substantial funding, which they used to finance guerrilla operations over the past 20 years, playing a decisive role in the USA defeat in Afghanistan. This crop has thrived throughout Central and Western Asia, particularly in Afghanistan, especially in southern provinces like Helmand, near the tri-border area of Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Iran. Most of the irrigation systems in Helmand are protected by USAID, an organization that acts as a front for the CIA. Farmers harvest poppies and transport opium through southern routes passing through Pakistan or Iran, causing opium to flood everywhere, leading to a nationwide epidemic. According to United Nations estimates from 2005 to 2015, the number of drug users in Afghanistan skyrocketed from 900,000 to 2.4 million. It is estimated that 1 in 3 households is affected by drugs. While Afghanistan produces a large amount of cannabis and methamphetamine, opioids are also widely used, with about 9% of the adult population and an increasing number of children being affected. Professor Julien Merciel, author of the book Cruel Harvest, U.S. intervention in the Afghan drug trade, warned that injecting drugs could spread HIV due to the habit of sharing needles. Over 20 years of war, the number of Afghans living in poverty increased from 9.1 million in 2007 to 19.3 million in 2016. A recent survey revealed that Afghans are among the saddest people in the world. 9 out of 10 respondents reported feeling miserable, and when asked to rate their lives on a scale of 10, the average score was just 2.7, the lowest among surveyed countries. CIA operations in Afghanistan have also had a severe impact on neighboring Pakistan. Alfred McCoy pointed out that in the late 1970s, it was rare to find a Pakistani addicted to drugs. However, by 1985, the Pakistani government reported that over 1.2 million people were addicted to drugs, turning both countries into global hotspots for drug trafficking. A 2013 United Nations report estimated that around 7 million Pakistanis use drugs and 4.25 million need urgent treatment. Nearly 2.5 million of these people are abusing heroin or opioids, with about 700 dying every day from overdoses. The report also showed that 11% of the population in Pakistan's mining and storage areas use drugs, primarily heroin. The health crisis, combined with societal stigma against addicts, is tearing families apart and turning many towns into violence hotspots. Iran has also reported a high number of opioid users, ranging from 2 to 3 million people, especially in towns near the Afghanistan-Pakistan border. Here, 1 gram of opium can be bought for just 50 cents, making the country the place with the highest drug addiction rate in the world. USA policies in the Middle East have made a small segment of people extremely wealthy while plunging tens of millions into poverty and addiction, leading to a global disaster fueled by the explosion of drug production. According to the Empire, over the past decade, opioid-related deaths have accounted for 71% of all global deaths, with nearly 841,000 USA dying from overdoses. Since the war began in Afghanistan, USA anti-drug forces have claimed that most of the illegal drugs in the USA were grown in Latin America. Now you understand why I said that the Golden Crescent is an indestructible sanctuary, don't you? It's simply because the USA needs it, and this has enabled the Taliban to connect with mafia gangs, creating a machine that operates along the border and spreads deadly drugs across the world. The USA government has a dark history related to the global drug trade. In Colombia, USA worked with President Alvaro Uribe in the international drug war. However, USA internal documents identified Uribe as one of the most notorious drug traffickers. He was an associate of the Medellin cartel and a close friend of Pablo Escobar. During his 2 presidential campaigns in 2002 and 2006, Uribe used cocaine profits to fund his political efforts. General Manuel Noriega, a key USA ally for many years, was from Panama and on the CIA payroll, even though Washington knew he was involved in drug trafficking. In 1972, when Noriega became the dictator of Panama, the situation didn't change much. By 1984, when the USA decided to invade Panama, Noriega was sentenced to 40 years in federal prison for drug-related crimes, while other prisoners continued to receive salaries and build homes. At the same time, investigative journalist Gary Webb exposed how the CIA funneled money into the dirty war against the leftist government in Nicaragua by selling drugs to black communities in the USA. The USA government connected far-right paramilitary groups with American drug lords, and to this day, it continues to support presidents despite their links to cocaine trafficking. In early 2021, a USA court sentenced the president's brother to life in prison for international drug trafficking, while the president himself faced no charges. Professor Julien Merciel criticized the USA military in Syria for not taking greater responsibility for the explosion of drug production in Afghanistan. After 9/11s, they allied with various warlords and influential politicians in Afghanistan to increase opium production and smuggling. These individuals became USA allies, and as a result, were not arrested or held accountable for their involvement in drug trafficking. Overall, millions of people have suffered in militarized regions, forced to use drugs to cope. As the opium trade surged, only a few profited while millions lost. This is why the Golden Crescent can never be destroyed. The USA needs it to favor its allies and make profits, while the Taliban needs it to survive the sanctions imposed by the USA. Today's story is about the legendary drug lord of the Golden Triangle, the global heroin king, Khun Sa. Khun Sa was the most powerful drug lord in the history of the Golden Triangle, taking over the territory from the first-generation drug lord Lo Sing Han, one of the most notorious drug traffickers in the world, often referred to by the USA government as the godfather of heroin. Khun Sa once confronted the Myanmar government army and did not flinch when surrounded by the Thai police and military. At the peak of his power, he commanded a private armed force of 20,000 men, armed with SAM-7 surface-to-air missiles, USA Stinger missiles, and modern grenade launchers. He controlled the world's largest heroin-producing kingdom, exporting 50 tons of heroin globally every month. The USA government placed a $2 million bounty on Khun Sa and hunted him worldwide. DEA Director Thomas Constantine once remarked that Khun Sa brought as much evil to the world as any mafia organization in human history. So, how did Khun Sa, from the son of a local chieftain, rise to become the unrivaled drug lord of the Golden Triangle, and even dream of establishing a drug nation? How did he reach the pinnacle of wealth and power? On April 13, 1933, Khun Sa was born in Shan State, eastern Myanmar. His father was a local chieftain, a leader of the minority ethnic groups in the area. In the usual course of events, Khun Sa would have simply waited to inherit his father's position and lived a life of comfort without worrying about basic needs, but his life took a significant turn. In the 1950s, a large number of defeated Chinese nationalist Kuomintang soldiers fled to Shan State in Myanmar. Although the Kuomintang had suffered a disastrous defeat in China, when faced with the Myanmar government forces, they remained a formidable force. Their leader even claimed that he could attack Rangoon at any time if he wished. Khun Sa saw an opportunity and quickly joined this force, believing his life was about to reach new heights. However, the Myanmar government army struggled to manage this situation. After several strategic meetings, they finally decided that if they couldn't defeat them with force, they would use cunning. Simply put, they played one side against the other. The Myanmar government allied with ethnic minority armed forces like Khun Sa to fight the Kuomintang army, while also requesting the United Nations to condemn and warn the Chinese nationalists. With this combined strategy, they finally managed to contain the remnants of the Kuomintang. However, what the Myanmar government didn't expect was that while they suppressed one side, the other side would rise. When the Kuomintang forces were temporarily subdued, Khun Sa emerged strongly. Khun Sa did not fit the stereotypical image that most people have of drug lords. He did not have a rough, menacing appearance. On the contrary, those who met him described him as having a gentle and approachable demeanor with a certain scholarly air. Unlike typical drug traffickers and thugs, Khun Sa was very intelligent. He didn't focus on immediate small gains, but knew how to be flexible, retreating to advance and accumulating power. Khun Sa had long decided to take advantage of the opportunity to help the government forces crush the Kuomintang Chinese forces to expand his military strength. In this way, Khun Sa managed to obtain many things for free, such as weapons, equipment, and military personnel. It could be said that he secured both the hardware and software necessary to consolidate his power. Afterward, Khun Sa officially began his plan. He started to sweep away and merge many small drug trafficking groups, rapidly growing in strength over a few short years, and rising to become a major drug lord in the Golden Triangle region. Speaking of the Golden Triangle, opium has a long history in this region. During the Age of Exploration, Western explorers sought to colonize lands across the globe. In the 18th and 19th centuries, the French occupied Vietnam and Laos, while the British, not wanting to fall behind, began infiltrating Myanmar and Thailand from India. As we all know, acquiring land was not their ultimate goal. What they truly desired was to make money. The British thought that if they could grow opium in India, why not in Myanmar? Moreover, the climate and soil in this region were ideal for opium cultivation, and they quickly transferred the entire opium growing process to Shan State in Myanmar. From there, opium cultivation gradually spread to northern Thailand and northwestern Laos, forming a triangular area known as the Golden Triangle. Being born and raised in the Golden Triangle, Khun Sa not only understood the power of drugs, but was also intimately familiar with it. Now, armed with weapons, gold, and a powerful force, he was determined to sweep away the smaller drug lords and dominate the entire Golden Triangle. However, Khun Sa faced a significant obstacle. Besides the Chinese Kuomintang army, the Golden Triangle at that time was also home to another notorious drug lord, Lo Sing Han. So who was Lo Sing Han? He was known as the first-generation drug lord of the region. At his peak, Lo Sing Han could transport 200 tons of drugs to Thailand, annually earning an income of up to $67 million. The British magazine, The Economist, even claimed that it was Lo Sing Han who made the USA military involved in the Vietnam War addicted to drugs. These USA soldiers later brought heroin back to the USA, contributing to the rise of drug addiction in the country. In the 1970s, countless USA youths became a lost generation in the heroin craze. Because of this, Lo Sing Han was dubbed the godfather of heroin by the media. There can't be two kings in one country, and now, the godfather of heroin, backed by the Chinese Kuomintang army, would have to face off against Khun Sa. In June 1967, Khun Sa organized a drug shipment that is still referred to as the Deal of the Century. The convoy consisted of 1,000 armed men leading nearly 600 horses to transport 21 tons of heroin worth $9 million to Laos. The buyer was a famous general in the Lao Army, Commander-in-Chief Uwan Radikon. This man exploited his power to trade large quantities of drugs and operated many opium refining factories in Laos. Each time he made a deal, he used stacks of USA dollars or directly exchanged for M16 rifles, showing great generosity. Khun Sa understood that if this deal succeeded, he could purchase over 1,000 M16 automatic rifles and a large amount of ammunition, completely upgrading his force's weapons overnight from old guns to new ones. To ensure the smooth transport, Khun Sa decided to personally oversee the operation. However, Lo Sing Han had long targeted this convoy. As Khun Sa's caravan neared the Mekong River and was about to reach its destination, a large number of armed men suddenly emerged from the riverside bushes, wildly firing submachine guns at Khun Sa's convoy. This was followed by the deafening roar of artillery, with smoke and debris flying everywhere. Seeing that they could not hold out, Khun Sa had no choice but to lead his men into a defensive position. In the end, the millions of dollars worth of goods were lost, making Khun Sa's deal a complete failure. How could Khun Sa swallow this anger? He had once tasted blood on the blade, battled in the trenches, and had seen it all. After regrouping his forces, he immediately planned an ambush to retaliate. On the other side, Lo Sing Han was triumphant on his way back, after defeating Khun Sa when Khun Sa seized the opportunity and launched a surprise attack, leaving Lo Sing Han completely defeated. However, just at that moment, 3 fighter jets appeared in the sky over Laos. Khun Sa was as delighted as a child seeing their mother return from the market when he witnessed the scene, thinking that it was his major ally, General Uwan Radikon, coming to assist him. However, Khun Sa's joy was short-lived, as he soon realized something was amiss. After bombing Lo Sing Han's convoy, the 3 fighter jets immediately turned and bombed Khun Sa's forces as well. Indeed, General Oana Ratikone had actually come to eliminate both sides. Upon learning that Loh Sing Han was planning to ambush Khun Sa, General Oana Ratikone saw an opportunity. If he intervened at the right moment, he could not only seize 20 tons of heroin, but also gain a reputation for eliminating evildoers. This was too perfect for him. Both Loh Sing Han and Khun Sa were ruthlessly deceived, gaining nothing and being forced to return empty-handed. Shortly after being tricked, Khun Sa encountered further trouble as the Myanmar government army targeted him. In October 1969, the Myanmar government army decided to invite Khun Sa to attend an emergency military meeting, where they then arrested him. The plan was so absurd it was almost unbelievable, akin to the story of Xiang Yu inviting Liu Bang to a feast in ancient times. Khun Sa eagerly attended the military meeting and was easily captured. However, Khun Sa's story didn't end there. On the contrary, it had only just begun. The Myanmar government eventually released Khun Sa in 1974. Ironically, while Khun Sa was in prison, the Myanmar government army had allied with the Thai government, and with USA military support, defeated Loh Sing Han's base. Thus, when Khun Sa was released, he was able to smoothly take over Loh Sing Han's territory. It was as if the heavens were favoring him, even making prison time work to his advantage. Just a few years later, in 1978, Vietnam sent troops into Cambodia to fight the Khmer Rouge, diverting the attention of Myanmar and Thailand. Anti-drug operations suddenly became less of a priority, and Khun Sa was free to operate within the vast Golden Triangle. He seized control of 155,000 square kilometers of land in the Golden Triangle, controlling over 70% of the opium production, and became the world's largest heroin producer. To ensure the safe transport of drugs, Khun Sa even established an armed escort team of 4,000 well-trained men. In the history of the Golden Triangle, there had never been a drug-dealing military power on such a large scale, an unprecedented phenomenon that perhaps no one could surpass in the future. In the following years, Khun Sa's influence penetrated deep into Thailand. By 1985, Khun Sa had even allied with a remnant group of the Chinese Kuomintang army, forming a coalition army and declaring himself the commander-in-chief. By 1993, Khun Sa felt that his days of small-scale business were over, and he began thinking of something bigger, establishing his own nation. What was most astonishing about Khun Sa was his ability to combine drug trafficking with politics. No matter how large the operation, a drug dealer is still a criminal. But Khun Sa was different. He didn't deal drugs just to get rich. He aimed to achieve independence for Shan State and bring prosperity to the Shan Republic. His vision was grand, and it almost sounded righteous. On December 14, 1993, Khun Sa declared the establishment of the Shan Republic and appointed himself as the president of this nation in Hamong. Shifting from drug trafficking to politics, he sent a letter to USA President Bill Clinton, requesting recognition of the Shan Republic, and at the same time, he sent a telegram warning the Myanmar government that if they intended to invade the Shan Republic, Khun Sa and his army would fight to the end to protect their homeland. To transform Hmong into a real capital, Khun Sa undertook large-scale construction projects, including houses, office buildings, warehouses, hospitals, and luxurious hotels. He relocated 6,000 residents to settle there, even building a hydroelectric plant, opening a textile factory, and setting up a gemstone processing plant, turning this once desolate land into a bustling area. Khun Sa's capital of Hamong was not a hidden jungle hideout, as many newspapers described, but a bustling metropolis with schools, hospitals, markets, and streets. The most frightening part is that he even opened schools, mandating that children in the Shan Republic start schooling at the age of 6 and continue until they are 16. After turning 16, those who were academically capable could continue studying abroad, while those who were not had to stay and join the military. However, there's no need to worry. There might be an opportunity in the future to engage in drug trafficking alongside the president. In 1993, during an interview with a Western journalist, Khun Sa declared that he and the people of Shan State were fighting for independence. He asserted that they were not receiving aid from anyone, and that opium cultivation was their only economic source. Khun Sa lived in a luxurious villa called the White House in Ban Hin Taik, 10 kilometers from Hamhung. He was always protected by 3,000 elite soldiers, and Khun Sa managed his army with a sense of loyalty, always respecting the educated and valuing camaraderie. Although he was a drug lord, Khun Sa did not allow his subordinates to use drugs. He had been addicted in the past, but had quit early on setting an example, and enforcing strict discipline with the rule that any subordinate caught using drugs would be severely punished. If drug trafficking had previously been merely a problem, it might not have caused the Myanmar government such headaches in suppression efforts. But now, with Khun Sa demanding independence and declaring the establishment of a nation, the Myanmar government was forced to seriously consider and act. In January 1994, a 15-member USA delegation visited Rangoon, the capital of Myanmar. The Myanmar government chose this moment to launch an attack on Khun Sa's territory. They mobilized 10,000 troops and police, including 3 elite infantry divisions, supported by helicopters and heavy weapons to attack Hamhung. The Shan Republic, barely a month old, faced its greatest crisis since its inception. By March 1995, after a year of being besieged, Khun Sa's rebel forces were forced to flee to Thailand under the strong attack of the Myanmar army. The Myanmar government then intensified efforts to eradicate drugs within the country and actively negotiated with Thailand. With close cooperation between the two nations, Khun Sa's senior aides were successively arrested by the police, making the situation increasingly unfavorable for him. By August, Khun Sa no longer wished to fight, repeatedly expressing that he was tired and longed for a peaceful life. On January 5, 1996, at Khun Sa's headquarters in Ban Hin Taik, Khun Sa led all his subordinates in a ceremony to surrender their weapons. According to records, a total of 9,749 people surrendered, handing over 6,004 weapons, including anti-aircraft missiles. After signing the surrender document, Khun Sa boarded a government helicopter and flew to Rangoon. The drug lord, who had dominated the Golden Triangle for decades, had finally ended his career. Khun Sa surrendered, but does that mean the drug problem in the Golden Triangle was resolved? Reality shows that the answer is no. Myanmar is the country with the most severe ethnic conflicts in Southeast Asia. Since gaining independence in 1948, the government has not been able to effectively resolve this issue, leading to ethnic armed forces within the country still occupying separate territories. In this context, Khun Sa emerged. These independent armed forces followed the principle of using drugs to support the army, using the army to protect drugs, relying on drug cultivation, production, and processing to sustain their forces. Drugs became their economic lifeline, so defeating drugs also meant cutting off their financial source. Moreover, drug cultivation was the only means of survival for the local people, who viewed drugs as a form of currency. Although there have been no more major drug lords since Khun Sa's small drug lords have sprung up everywhere, such as Na Kam, the prototype for the drug lord in the Mekong River case. Furthermore, with the emergence of new types of drugs, drug production factories in the Golden Triangle have transitioned from a heroin kingdom to a meth kingdom, with drug smuggling operations continuing unabated. In this situation, merely cracking down on drug trafficking is not enough to solve the drug problem in the Golden Triangle. First, the economic problems of the local people need to be addressed. Only when their lives are secure, prosperous, and alternative crop strategies are found can the cultivation of opium be prevented. Then, legislative efforts to control drug trafficking must be strengthened, rehabilitation centers established, and comprehensive and stringent measures implemented to dismantle drug trafficking activities. Only by implementing these measures simultaneously can the drug problem be truly eradicated. The drug problem in the Golden Triangle was not formed overnight, so finding a solution is only the first step in a long and challenging journey. The fight against drugs in the Golden Triangle still faces many difficulties, and the road ahead is long. However, for ordinary people, the most important thing we can do is always say no to drugs. Using drugs only leads to broken families and lost lives. Refusing drugs is the best way to protect ourselves and preserve a beautiful world. There are people who are sacrificing their lives to take on the responsibility of protecting our peace. Let's hope for a world free of drugs and wish for peace and safety for everyone and every home. Did you know that Belgium, a country often praised for its delicious waffles and world-class chocolates, is quietly becoming the drug capital of Europe? Last year, 110 tons of cocaine were produced, along with other synthetic drugs right in Belgium, highlighting a significant issue of drug production within Europe. In 2020 alone, the Port of Antwerp accounted for 40% of all cocaine seizures in the European Union. By 2021, this number had risen to 90 tons of cocaine, marking a 50% increase compared to 5 years earlier. Each year, the numbers set new records, and clearly, no one wants this trend to continue. While you are enjoying a stroll through the picturesque streets of Brussels, just nearby traffickers are smuggling tons of drugs into the country. But how did Belgium, a country known for its peaceful landscapes and historic architecture, become a hub for one of the world's most dangerous drugs? What is driving this illicit trade, and more importantly, is there anything that can be done to stop it? Located in the northern part of Belgium, Antwerp is a bustling port city known for its rich history and vibrant culture. However, beneath its attractive facade lies a dark reality. Antwerp has emerged as the center of cocaine trafficking in Europe. Once overshadowed by neighboring cities, Antwerp's strategic location and well-developed infrastructure have made it an attractive hub for criminal organizations. Situated along the Scheldt River, the Port of Antwerp is Europe's second-largest port, handling over 12 million containers annually and serving as a gateway for international trade. The port's extensive shipping network and efficient logistics have inadvertently facilitated cocaine traffickers exploiting its advantages. In recent years, the city has become the focal point for drug trafficking with record drug seizures, indicating that the Port of Antwerp accounted for not just 10% or 20%, but 40% of all cocaine seizures in the European Union in 2020. Antwerp's prominent position has been further solidified by its seamless integration into the global supply chain. Legitimate businesses flock to the port for its convenience and accessibility, but inadvertently sharing space with illegal activities. The allure of quick profits and minimal risk has attracted criminal organizations to Antwerp's shores, transforming it into a hub for drug smuggling operations. Criminal organizations from the Western Balkans have targeted Antwerp's vulnerabilities, using sophisticated tactics to evade detection and maximize profits. In a recent case that shook Antwerp, the situation became even more alarming in June 2020 when authorities uncovered a chilling operation hidden within the seemingly innocuous facade of a shipping container. This container, camouflaged among everyday items, concealed a sinister cargo, 2 tons of cocaine. This revelation sent shockwaves through law enforcement, prompting a swift and determined response to unravel the intricate web of criminality behind the operation. The mastermind behind this covert operation was none other than Dritan Rajapi, a notorious figure in the criminal underworld with connections to the Balkans. Known for his ruthlessness and cunning, Rajapi orchestrated a sophisticated network spanning continents with roots tracing back to Albania. Despite being imprisoned in Ecuador in 2014, Rajapi's influence extended far beyond the confines of his cell, as evidenced by his continued control over a highly profitable cocaine empire. As authorities peeled back the layers of deception, they discovered a chain of corruption and complicity extending from the Port of Antwerp to the highest levels of power. Former port executives, drug enforcement officers, and even a lawyer were implicated in this operation, highlighting the extensive influence of organized crime within Belgium's borders. Bananas, a seemingly innocuous fruit, have become a symbol of cocaine smuggling operations in Antwerp. Taking advantage of the perishable nature of bananas, traffickers exploit the urgency of customs clearance to discreetly smuggle drugs past authorities. This demonstrates the traffickers' familiarity with and meticulous preparation for Belgian law. At the heart of this smuggling operation is the allure of enormous financial profits, drawing criminal organizations into the dangerous world of drug trafficking. the economics of smuggling reveal a harsh reality. The profit potential far exceeds the risks, with margins reaching up to 1,500%. The relatively low production costs, compared to the sky-high prices of drugs in the European market, allow traffickers to earn vast sums from each shipment. One participant revealed, "Each trip I make 2,000 euros, all in cash." The profit margins along the supply chain are immense, with the value of the product soaring at each step from production to distribution, filling the pockets of those ready to exploit the global drug trade's loopholes. For many, the enormous sums to be made from this illicit activity are too tempting to resist, driving a cycle of exploitation and violence that shows no signs of abating. In the world of drug smuggling, access to strategic infrastructure is key to success. Antwerp's vast seaport, the second largest in Europe, provides traffickers with a gateway to the lucrative markets of the continent, offering a significant advantage for their illicit operations. The port's network of shipping routes and efficient logistics infrastructure acts as a conduit for smooth drug transportation. Moreover, the port's geographic location further enhances its appeal to criminal organizations, providing direct access to major European population centers from Amsterdam to Paris. Cocaine traffickers take advantage of Antwerp's strategic location to distribute illegal goods with relative ease. Despite numerous efforts to bolster security and crack down on drug trafficking, the enormous volume of cargo passing through the port of Antwerp presents a significant challenge for law enforcement agencies. As traffickers continue to exploit the port's vulnerabilities, authorities struggle to stem the tide of drugs flowing into Europe. So, what sparked the explosion of this drug trafficking operation in the first place? In the chaotic aftermath of the war in Europe, the Balkans emerged as fertile ground for the rise of organized crime. Balkan mafia gangs born from the ashes of conflict and economic turmoil quickly established themselves as formidable players in the global drug market. Originating from countries such as Albania, Croatia, and Bosnia, these gangs possess a unique blend of resilience, resourcefulness, and entrepreneurial spirit. Faced with limited opportunities in their war-torn homelands, many turn to crime as a means of survival and prosperity. Driven by a relentless pursuit of wealth and power, Balkan mafia gangs leveraged their connections and ingenuity to carve out a niche in the lucrative cocaine trade. From modest beginnings, they rose to prominence by exploiting weaknesses in the global supply chain to expand their criminal enterprises. With a keen understanding of the dynamics of the international drug market, Balkan gangs sought to extend their influence beyond their homeland, establishing intricate supply chains that spanned continents. Leveraging their connections and expertise, they have forged alliances with partners in South America, the epicenter of cocaine production. Through these strategic relationships, Balkan mafia gangs have secured a steady supply of cocaine from countries such as Colombia and Ecuador. Once they had control of the supply, they used their knowledge of shipping routes and logistics to manage the smooth transportation of cocaine from South America to Europe. Antwerp, with its vast port and strategic location, has become a crucial transit point in this complex network. Having established their position in the global cocaine market, the Balkan mafia gangs sought to control the entire supply chain from production to distribution. By commanding every stage, they could maximize profits and minimize risks, thereby consolidating their power and influence in the criminal underworld. Through strategic investments and acquisitions, they have expanded their operations. This vertical integration streamlines their activities, reduces costs, and maintains tight control over the flow of drugs into Central Europe. In the clandestine world of cocaine trafficking, corruption has emerged as a powerful force, infiltrating all levels of society and undermining the pillars of law and order. From low-level officials to high-ranking authorities, the tentacles of corruption extend everywhere, facilitating the operations of criminal organizations. In Belgium, the impact of corruption is particularly severe, as traffickers brazenly bribe port officials and law enforcement personnel to turn a blind eye to their illegal activities. The allure of easy money has proven irresistible to those entrusted with upholding the law, leading to a culture of complicity and impunity. Unfortunately, Belgium is not the only victim of corruption, as it extends beyond its borders, infiltrating governments and institutions across Europe. Traffickers exploit weak governance structures and lax tax oversight to fuel their illicit trade, perpetuating a cycle of corruption that undermines democracy and erodes public trust. However, while bribery is a powerful tool, it is not the only method employed by traffickers. When other methods fail, violence becomes their last resort. From rival gangs to law enforcement agencies, no one is immune from the shadow of violence that looms over cocaine trafficking in Belgium. Reports of turf wars and brutal reprisals highlight the ruthless tactics employed by drug dealers to protect their interests and eliminate competition. Armed with guns and intimidation tactics, they impose their dominance with an iron fist, instilling fear in those who dare to challenge them. Moreover, violence extends beyond the realm of criminal enterprises, spilling over into streets and communities ravaged by cocaine addiction. Innocent bystanders become collateral damage in the relentless pursuit of profit, as traffickers resort to increasingly brazen acts of violence to maintain their grip on the market. In the relentless cat-and-mouse game against cocaine trafficking, law enforcement agencies find themselves locked in a perpetual struggle against formidable and highly adaptable trafficking networks. In Belgium, the fight against smuggling networks is conducted on multiple fronts, with law enforcement agencies carrying out a series of undercover operations to weaken the control of organized crime over the country's drug market. A notable operation took place in June 2020, when Belgian authorities led by the federal police executed a raid on a warehouse just outside the port of Antwerp. Under the guidance of experienced investigators, the operation uncovered an elaborate cocaine smuggling ring operating from the warehouse. When armed police raided the location, they discovered a range of alarming tools used by criminal organizations, including a torture chamber with a dentist's chair and soundproofing, as well as a fake police uniform store. The audacity of the operation shocked law enforcement circles and highlighted the brazenness of the involved criminals. The operation resulted in the seizure of a large quantity of cocaine and the arrest of several individuals believed to be key members of the smuggling network, including those with ties to the Balkan Mafia, further underscoring the influence of organized crime in Belgium's drug market. However, the crackdown did not go unnoticed by the drug mafias operating in Belgium. Following the raid, there were reports of retaliatory actions from criminal elements, including threats against law enforcement officials and acts of violence against rival gangs. The scale and complexity of the issue pose significant challenges as traffickers exploit loopholes and employ increasingly sophisticated methods to smuggle cocaine into the country. Moreover, the transnational nature of cocaine trafficking complicates law enforcement efforts as traffickers exploit loose borders and weak regulatory structures to facilitate their operations. Despite the coordination of Belgian authorities, smuggling networks continue to adapt and innovate, creating ongoing challenges. Despite their best efforts, Belgian law enforcement agencies face considerable limitations in both resources and strategy in combating cocaine smuggling. Limited budgets, staffing shortages, and outdated equipment hinder their ability to disrupt illegal activities and dismantle smuggling networks. Reactive law enforcement strategies often fall short in addressing the root causes of the problem, focusing primarily on intervention and seizure rather than prevention and early intervention. Without adequate resources and support, Belgian authorities struggle to keep pace with the ever-changing tactics of traffickers, leading to a cycle of enforcement failure and missed opportunities. As Belgium faces the significant challenge of curbing cocaine smuggling, proposed solutions emphasize the need to bolster resources and advance technology to support law enforcement efforts. Agencies are calling for increased budgets and staffing to enhance their ability to intercept cocaine shipments and dismantle smuggling networks. With sufficient resources, authorities could invest in modern surveillance equipment, including advanced scanning technology and drones to improve detection capabilities at ports and border crossings. Additionally, investing in training and professional development could equip law enforcement personnel with the skills and expertise needed to effectively combat organized crime. By providing the necessary tools and knowledge to navigate the complex landscape of cocaine trafficking, Belgium can strengthen its defenses against this threat. Recognizing the international nature of cocaine trafficking, Belgium acknowledges the necessity of working closely with international partners to halt the flow of narcotics into the country. By establishing strategic alliances with neighboring countries, as well as major transit and source nations in South America, Belgium can disrupt smuggling networks at their origins and dismantle the infrastructure supporting their operations. Furthermore, collaboration with international organizations like Europol and Interpol can enhance information sharing and capacity building initiatives, strengthening Belgium's ability to combat organized crime on a global scale. For decades, countries around the world have waged an ongoing battle against drugs, employing punitive measures to eradicate drug trafficking and consumption. However, as cocaine smuggling continues to thrive, there is growing recognition of the need to rethink traditional methods and explore alternative strategies, including legalization. The war on drugs has been characterized by aggressive law enforcement tactics, mass incarceration, and punitive drug policies that have disproportionately affected marginalized communities. Despite significant investments in law enforcement efforts, illegal drug trade persists, driven by demand and exacerbated by prohibitive policies. The financial cost of the war is mounting, making a reevaluation of traditional approaches and the exploration of alternative strategies more urgent than ever. Policymakers and experts are increasingly questioning the effectiveness of current measures and are exploring harm reduction-focused approaches that emphasize public health and social justice. Drug legalization represents a shift in drug policy, challenging long-standing assumptions and offering a new framework for addressing the complex challenges posed by drug trafficking and addiction. Proponents argue that it provides a practical solution to issues associated with drug prohibition, including violence, corruption, and organized crime. By regulating and controlling the production, distribution, and consumption of drugs, governments can disrupt criminal control over the drug market and mitigate its negative societal impacts. Legalization also presents an opportunity to redirect resources from law enforcement and incarceration towards prevention, treatment, and harm reduction initiatives. By prioritizing public health over punishment, governments can address the root causes of drug addiction and reduce the societal harms associated with drug use. By bringing drug production and distribution out of the shadows and into the public market, governments can promote transparency, accountability, and consumer safety. While legalization may offer numerous benefits, it is not without its challenges and controversies. Opponents worry that legalization could lead to increased drug use and addiction, undermine public safety, and exacerbate social inequality. There are also concerns about the potential for corporate interests to dominate the legal drug market, prioritizing profit over public health and safety. Additionally, the international legal framework surrounding drug control presents a significant barrier to legalization, with many countries bound by international treaties that prohibit the production, distribution, and use of certain drugs. Any move toward legalization will need to carefully consider these legal obligations and the potential ramifications for international relations and cooperation. How do you feel about this story? Share your thoughts below for others to see. Don't forget to like and subscribe to support me. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.